Learning Ally is a proud sponsor of the Empowered Dyslexia podcast. Learning Ally, a nonprofit education organization, helps to transform the lives of struggling learners by delivering proven solutions that help students reach their potential. We have a heritage of supporting students with a reading deficit like dyslexia. Our award-winning human-read audiobook solution helps students in grades 3 through 12 access books they want and need to read to help them succeed. Visit www.learningally.org for more information.
The following content is not intended as a substitute for professional legal advice, medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your attorney, advocate, physician, or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding any medical or educational concerns.
Hello and welcome to Empower Dyslexia. I'm your host, Stephen Yearout, and this show is here to help you become a better parent and partner in education. On this show, we discuss dyslexia and other related disorders. We discuss interventions, special education policy at the local, state, and federal level. We also interview experts in their field. And the piece that I like the most is we speak to y'all, the people who have personal stories about dealing with learning disabilities and how we navigate these waters in education. Please be sure to subscribe to us on our Facebook page and YouTube page. Leave us a comment. We love to hear from you. If you like to listen to your podcast, we're on every app that you could possibly get your podcast from. iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, you name it, we're there. So today, we're in a unique position with remote learning, with a pandemic, with trying to understand how to keep our kids in school and educated. We have a returning guest, my good friend Lisa Flores. She's a parent advocate. She is on, you name it, she's on that committee when it is dealing with making sure that our children with special needs get the remediation, the services, the support that they need. She is a tireless advocate. She's always out there fighting for all of our kids. She's also works for Easter Seals. She was on the Special Education Funding Allotment Committee for House Bill 3 here in Texas, our last legislative session. So I would like to welcome a returning guest and my good friend, Lisa Flores.
Hello. Thank you for having me back, Stephen. That was a very gracious introduction. Thank you.
Well, I mean, you are always out there looking for how do we provide the best and appropriate service for our kids that need it the most.
I do my best. Sometimes that's, going to serving on legislative committees. Sometimes that's taking phone calls from parents to just answer questions. I try to help wherever and however I can.
Yeah, I mean, it's an honor to know you because, I mean, I get to know that there's these other people that are out there that are doing things that I can't do. I mean, you're in Austin or you're down in that direction. So, I can't be at the Capitol. That's something I can't physically do being where I'm at. So, knowing that we have people that are constantly going that have the same ideas of service, of education, of the need that our children have, all I can say is thank you.
I would just like to welcome you and all your listeners to, even though you don't live in Austin and you don't live close to the Capitol, there's always ways to engage with your legislators. They're there to represent you at the Capitol. So I'd like to invite you and all your listeners to always reach out to your elected officials and share your stories, because really the best laws always come from personal stories. And if they don't know them and they're not hearing them, things won't change. So I just like to invite everybody to really share their stories or barriers or successes with their legislators. That's what they're there for. And that is what governs policy.
Great advice. So today I'm going to put this, this photograph up that I found or it's a cartoon that I found on the internet. I'm not sure who to give credit to for the cartoon. However, this is what we're talking about today. Could you please shovel the ramp? All these other kids are waiting to use the stairs. When I get through shoveling them off, then I will clear the ramp for you. But if you shovel the ramp, we can all use it. This is what we're talking about. This is equality for us, equal access for us. And the topic today is in the remote learning scenario that we're in, or this environment that we're in, the unseen consequences to this environment of learning. So, the very first, kind of bullet point that I want to talk about is, our students that have, or in special education or 504, a lot of times, especially in this scenario, I see them becoming or being an afterthought when we are putting together policies and procedures on how do we roll out this remote learning for our children. It's more of well, I didn't think that they would have these type of problems, or I didn't know that, they needed this support, or so on and so forth. We need to make sure that we're thinking about these kids first.
So I have a couple of thoughts around this, and bringing it back to the illustration that you showed. What we're talking about is universal design. We're talking about access, right? So I go to a lot of different meetings, just to even other ARD meetings with parents, to my meetings, from high level to low level meetings, and frequently the commonality that I see is that there's very rarely front-loaded planning for students with disabilities and their families. So it's very difficult to plan for a population that you're not considering at the forefront. And an example of that is, so you mentioned I was on the HB3 committee. Well, they had tons of policy meetings around school finance prior to HB3 passing. But for some reason, special education wasn't touched. They didn't invite experts from all over the country to share what special education funding, they didn't consider special education funding part of the broader topic of school finance. So now we need another committee to only look at special education, and we have to go to a different session during a pandemic, and that will present its own challenges in changing the funding system for special education. How does that tie into remote learning? Well, the TEA has issued a bunch of guidance around best practices for school districts. And one of those recommendations was that each school district should form a task force, and that task force should have disability representation so that plans, curriculum changes, delivery of services could be planned with disability in mind. Unfortunately, this guidance was released in August, and most task force happened in June. So, the actual participation and planning for this student body is going to vary from school district to school district. There's no guarantee that one school district had disability representation in their planning stages. So, to your point, how are people at a curricular level, directors of curriculum, of academics, of the people that are planning, how are they planning for a population if nobody is explaining to them best practices to plan for all students? So the plans de facto will be for, middle of the road neurotypical learners, because that's typically who is considered.
Right. So going back to that cartoon, we're talking about, let's shovel off the ramp. Let's make sure that we can all access our education appropriately. You talked about TEA. One of the things that TEA required is that our districts roll out a remote learning management platform. And this has been a big struggle, because if you're not planning, if you're not considering the children that are going to be affected the most, they're going to have the most struggles. Therefore, again, they're becoming an afterthought. It is we'll take care of them if they start having issues, not let's be proactive in this and make sure that we're seeing roadblocks that is going to cause issues with these students. The other thing that I've been seeing, and Lisa, you can jump in here, is a lot of districts are modifying their SPED, their IEP, and 504 plans when it comes to delivering remediation and providing those services that are mandated by either the 504 plan or the IEP. So things like amount of time for the remediation, accommodations are not being given or provided, whether it's classroom and or tests. The other big thing is training on how to use the accommodations. If it's not a face-to-face and it's not hey, I'm going to sit here and read, give you oral admin for or oral administration for your test or your assignment, and you're saying, well, it's got an immersive reader. Well, if you haven't trained that child on how to use that technology, it's useless.
Yeah. Just a couple of things I wanted to touch on. It goes back to are your curricular planners planning for all learners? Typically the canned answer whenever somebody asks about disability in school districts is, oh, the SPED department is doing that, or, oh, don't worry, they have it. So the first barrier, I believe, is just responsibility for any high-level people in any systems. I don't want to pick on it one particular school district or one particular system. In anything, is to take accountability and responsibility that this population is yours too. If we were to silo the responsibility for planners, oh, well, I don't plan for X community. Oh, I don't plan for Latinos. There would be hell to pay, but yet it is normalized when it has to do with disability. Oh, the special does that. That's my first point. My second, at some point, we're going to have to move the needle towards planning and high-level decisions, integrating considerations of race, socioeconomic status, and disability into decision-making as a matter of course and equity, and that should be normalized. My second point is, a lot of the modifications to plans and IEPs and 504 plans is they will issue the continuity plans or contingency plans to parents. And many parents don't know that they have the right to parental input to ask questions about those plans. So plans are going to be issued. And I just want to be clear that parents have the right to not sign them and ask questions and have input on what plans and how they're being modified. My third point is that it seems to me the trend from when talking to parents that students are getting less, not getting more. And there's a bandwidth issue there. That bandwidth literally can be internet connectivity, but it can also be the availability of the staff to provide those services for online learning, which is understandable. And I'm empathetic to the providers because their caseloads are huge. So if there was ever a time for assistive technology to be embraced and truly looked at for all students, this is it. I can give you an example from my own life, and I don't want to ramble too much, but so my son is going into middle school and he has assistive technology on his IEP and nobody has taught him to use it. So he had some mandatory summer reading. So, they call me and they say, your son needs to go log in and do his reading. Well, the book wasn't available in audio for him, and the instructions were available in immersive reader. And he also needed some pre-taught concepts around the book, because there were some really high-level social issues around race and apartheid that had come into play. So I asked for those 3 things. And it was just, and I'm not blaming anybody. This is not a blame and game thing, but there just was not access to facilitate him to do that assignment. So he just didn't do it. That was my choice. I was like, this is not accessible. We can't do it. And I often wonder, like, these modifications, like, how many parents actually know that the modification is more around administrative ease than student need?
You brought up a great point that without knowing how to use the accommodations, your child became frustrated and you didn't do it. I mean, I use this analogy a lot with not knowing how to use the technology that you have been given. If I take any laptop that anybody has at this point in time in 2020 and set it down in front of you and tell you to steer the Apollo 13 home, and you're going to look at me and go, I have no idea how to do that. But the laptop that's sitting in front of you has more computing power than what had the Apollo 13 had on it. So you should be able to use it. You should be able to do it. No, I haven't been trained on how to use it. We have to make sure that these kids understand what these accommodations are, especially if they're digital platform accommodations, and how to properly use them.
Right. So it often also makes me question, like, how many students have assistive technology or some sort of technological support built into their IEP and don't actually know how to use it. Like,
I would say most of them.
I would say that that's probably the norm, right? And the onus is on the parent to know to ask for training, for direct support, to teach the kid how to use it. So
it's the afterthought. It is the
exactly.
Squeaky wheel. If you don't know, you should ask, which I agree. I mean, if you don't know, we need to ask. But we should be having, and I'm not putting this all on the special education or the 504 coordinators, therapists, whatever, because there's very limited amount of those, and there's a lot of kids that need help. Daily instructions in this new digital platform, they're all written, and sometimes they're written very poorly. So when you're dealing with a child with dyslexia, it's a reading and language disability, and that child sees an entire page of instructions when if it was bullet pointed out or something else, it was condensed. They look at that. I witnessed my own child going through this. He saw the amount of instructions that the teacher put in the assignment and shut down. And this is where self-advocacy is so important, because the child is behind sometimes a camera that's turned off, a microphone that's turned off. So if those children aren't speaking up, they're forgotten.
Well, let's also be really clear. We're speaking from an extreme place of privilege. As like, you and I could be like, well, just ask for what you need. So, but that is the exception and not the norm. I think the vast majority of parents don't necessarily know what to ask for because they don't know what is missing. So knowledge and the ability to maneuver within a system and understand even that there's assistive technology available is a privileged position. I think I wish we could move the needle towards, assistive technology not being this thing that parents need to know about to ask for, but rather a thing that is front loaded for everybody, and those who need it, even if they're non-disabled, can access it. Because having a reactive system that you have to know X to be able to access Y is not. It doesn't empower better student outcomes. It goes back to the illustration of the ramp, right? If all laptops have assistive technology sort of front loaded on it, or systems are designed, platforms are designed for the reader that needs the most, or I should say the learner, not the reader, the student that needs the most help that is possible via technology, then we catch a wider net of people who benefit, right? But we don't have that system. We have, those who ask for it, or those who know what needs to happen are likely to get it, and those who do not. And I think that there's a real opportunity in this pandemic to learn that lesson and to make sure that the technology and that ramp exists, the visual of the ramp, like that we are moving the needle towards planning for, like, if we planned for all students that have the highest needs, students that don't speak English, their parents that don't speak English, students with low socioeconomic levels, students with disabilities, then all, like, by default, every other learner benefits. But we plan for the easiest learner, and then other people have to know how to ask for the ramp to be shoveled, if you will.
Right. And you brought up a great point about the IT piece of this. So when IT is building these profiles for our learners, for our students, the district already knows who's in special education, who's in 504, what accommodations they have. Why IT should be building a profile that automatically gives all of these students every app that is appropriate for them that the district provides. And then you already have a list of kids to go do training with, to make sure that they understand how to use it and their parents understand how to use it. And then you don't miss these kids. I mean, we really have to step back and we need to look at these districts are multi-million-dollar or even $500 million corporations. And if you go to any corporation that's not education, there's no corporation that has that much revenue coming in is ever going to do some of these things that our education system is doing.
I'd like to add to that too, that the communication frequently with school districts, just like corporations, is one way, right? They communicate to their stakeholders what they need to know. And what is really needed is actual community engagement, two-way communication, because having parent training makes a presumption that there's a vehicle for parents to get training from the school district. It makes the presumption that there is a vehicle for communication and for support. And not all districts have that. Not all districts have the capacity or even people to supply that training. And parents may not know to even ask or to unify around that. So to your point, like, this is not only an access issue, it's also a parent engagement and communication issue, because I guarantee that if one parent feels like they need, say, a training on Blend, or a training around how to use Learning Ally, there's probably many more parents that need that training. But instead of just going, we need to communicate this and formulate a plan to support this, it's frequently just a one-to-one reactive system. Like, okay, well, that person got it, check. And I think that another benefit of looking at this pandemic is really, how do school systems engage with parents in a way that is not just one way, like, we need you to do this one-sided, and create vehicles for support to improve student outcomes.
This isn't part of the topic that we're really talking about, but I mean, that's something that I have seen a lot of. And while, when parents walk into the doors of a school to go have a meeting, a lot of times these parents are already on guard because they're being talked to. They're being told all this information instead of, like you were saying, having this conversation, this open dialogue, being that partner in education to help my child get the most out of the education that they're going to provide. So let's move on to the next kind of bullet point. Amount of time to understand the lesson, or the amount of steps it takes to actually get the lesson. I mean, we sat down and we were trying to just do one of the lessons that one of my sons had. And there was, you had to go to this link, drill down, find this other link, download that, convert it into another format, watch a video, take that first document that you had, answer it, convert it back into another video or document, and then send it back in order to submit it. While I'm a systems engineer and we were struggling trying to get, just the information to do the assignment, what happens for people and students and parents that are not computer inclined? They don't understand how to use a computer. They don't understand, hey, sometimes you just have to keep clicking, drilling down, trying to find the information. And it's, 4:00 in the afternoon, your teachers are unavailable.
Yes, I hear you. So I recently had a conversation with a teacher friend of mine, and I have to give some props to the district that serves my kids. They kind of tried to make Canvas or Blend uniform in the way it looks, so it wasn't overwhelming to parents and to students. So there's some uniformity within how it's delivered. However, the uniformity still requires more than 5 clicks to maneuver to something. So I was talking to a teacher friend of mine who is a special education teacher at a high school level, and her presentation for her Blend page was super intuitive. It was a calendar. So you go to the day, and in that calendar, it was like takes you to your Zoom link, takes you to the lessons you need to do that day. And it struck me that how many clicks it really takes to maneuver to where you need to go, to your point. And this also plays into a question of disability as well. There are many students who have disabilities that impact their ability to follow multi-step instructions, right? There's this presumption that everybody who can use a computer can also follow multi-step instructions. And that is frankly an ableist assumption. Not all people are able to do that at any age.
Just because you can turn a computer on does not mean that you can use a computer. I mean, when I was in IT support, I mean, I supported, multi-million-dollar companies. I supported the diocese here in Dallas, and when you walk in and the highest people in the company are having trouble just accessing email or making sure that they can send an email or open a document. I mean, these people are running multi-million-dollar companies. So what does that say for our children that are trying to just get a lesson done? And I mean, the more and more that they miss as far as schoolwork goes, the more and more daunting this task become. That, hey, I've got 2 weeks worth of work I've got to do in 8 classes. And these kids, they just, when it's like that, they just give up. It's too much. I'm done.
We also need to talk about, again, the presumption that all people are computer literate. Like, so I know districts have done an incredible heavy lift in getting technology to everybody, right? And I want to give credit where credit is due. That was a super heavy lift,
yes.
Right? However, the people, like, there are language issues. There are, not everybody in Texas is an English speaker. There's many refugees here as well. There are also issues of socioeconomics that impact how you use a computer.
I mean, there's
again,
a lot of people
like you're gonna, like, okay, you get a computer, or what? Like, does your parent have the availability during the day to learn how to use a computer, or are they working? Like, there's a lot of issues that come into play than just like you have a technology check. We did it, and I think that that's the piece that school districts are really scrambling to put together. And as a community, that would be an amazing, like, is it the school district's responsibility to teach people to be computer literate? I can't answer that. I do think that this is an opportunity for community, like if you have those computing skills, to put forth to any community that you can, to offer your skills to walk someone through it who maybe is not an English speaker. If you speak that language, there's a lot of opportunity for community here, I hope.
Well, the language barrier, I've heard the language barrier from another good, trusted advisor that I talk to all the time. And then, again, to your point, when we talk about the laptop, the computer, think about how many people that are, my age, 40 plus, that look at a computer and are scared of it. They don't even want to touch it because they don't want to break it. So they choose to completely avoid the computer. They don't know anything about it. So now they can't help their kids at all. There's zero help.
And there's also teachers who feel like that.
Yes.
Like, not all teachers are, super computer literate because of age or because of economics or whatever reason.
And then, we talked about the amount of written instructions. I was sitting down with my middle son. We were trying to get caught up on all the work that he has. And even being somebody that is very computer literate, we are struggling in remote learning. And it isn't because they don't know how to do the work or can't do the work. There is that aspect, kind of like there's a lot of people that can't work from home. There's too many distractions. There's too many other things that are going on. And they end up not getting their work done. So my middle son is behind, and we're sitting there trying to work through a lot of these assignments, and they're not reading, or he is not reading the entire instructions. And if you read through the instructions, you'll find out that, hey, it's really not as big of a project as what you think it is. Copy and pasting and doing these type of things. But again, it's a lot of that multi-step, and it looks like a bigger project than what it is. And the kids just freak out and don't do it. So we need to make sure that we are keeping that in mind when we're putting these instructions in whatever platform that we're using, and making sure that the kids understand these are simple, bullet pointed out instructions on how to accomplish this lesson.
Well, I just wanted to say too, adding another layer to this, my son isn't presumed competent enough to do homework or catch up on his work. So he frequently just isn't expected to do it. So there is another sort of layer of ableism that, like, oh, it's, not for this kid, he can't do it. So how do you ever learn study skills if no one expects you to study?
Right. It's unbelievable that for our children that have other cognitive issues that they're dealing with, that they need help with, that the expectation of greatness for them is so low. It's very sad, because we should expect greatness out of them. What we are showing is that we don't believe in what it is that we're teaching them. We don't believe that they can. We're believing that lie that they can't be any better, and that's just simply not the truth. Science doesn't believe that, doesn't say that. Medical science doesn't say that. We need to make sure that
I agree. I agree wholeheartedly with you. And I think that to your point, the long instruction pages and the simplified instructions, I think that I really value that teachers want to give as much detailed instruction as they can to walk people through it. I think that there's value in that. I would never want to ding anybody for that, but I also think that like there should be modifications and simplified instructions and expectations for people who like do need more simplified assignments or need more access to simplified instructions. I think there's value in that too, and I think one does not negate the other. I believe there's room for both.
Right. And you know, I'll add in that this is not a bashing session on the teachers, because I mean, the teachers are learning something brand new, a lot of them also, and they have their own family and things that they have to try to get done and deal with in remote learning and everything else. So, I mean, it's not a one person job. It's the partnering in education. We all need to be present and accounted for. We all need to be here.
Absolutely. And attitudinally, I agree with you. But what I think what is on paper and what happens in real life are two different things. From what I've seen, typically, questions around special education at my district, like there's this, what it says on paper and what really happens. What really happens is that special education teachers do all the heavy lifting. That's the truth.
Right.
Like they are the ones charged with making plans, contacting families, modifying lessons. They are doing the heavy lifting, and frequently they're doing it unassisted by general education teachers or by other teachers. So there's, to your point about training, like and a responsibility, like all your students are your students, whether or not you're a special education teacher or a general education teacher. And my heart goes out to teachers, truly. Just, I want to be really clear and on this podcast saying that I value all your work, and I incredibly value the job you do and the support you offer and the position that you've been put in to serve kids. So I just want to give some love to some teachers that are doing a lot of the heavy lifting right now.
Well, there's also our pastor did a series on delegation versus relegation, and this kind of folds back into this. Delegation or relegation is delegation without investigation. So if you delegate something to somebody and you walk away from it and you say, oh, they have it, like you were saying, special education is doing it, I'm not worried about it. You know, that's their department. And nobody's ever coming back around and making sure that those things are being done. That's relegation. That's not delegation. And that is where our kids get lost. That's where they're forgotten. That's where they're an afterthought, because nobody's making sure that everything is clicking together. All cogs are working.
I love that. And I'm going to steal your relegation versus delegation from your pastor and from you. Consider it stolen.
Absolutely. So the other piece of this is stress, right? This is all students that are dealing with stress of technology not working. Can't log in. Don't know how to log in. Can't find the link for the Google Meet or the Zoom call or whatever, or it doesn't work. Technology is not working where you can't answer a question. You know the answer, but you can't answer because you can't figure out how to turn the microphone on, whatever the situation is. Behavior from other students. I mean, we're hearing horror stories about, some of the stuff that these kids are doing on these Zoom calls or Google Meet calls, and or disruption from other family members, brothers and sisters, cats, dogs, whatever, that's running around the house. And then you brought up a really good one when we were talking about this. When you, we take a, you use the position privileged position where, what about the kids that live in a 1-bedroom apartment or a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment, and they've got a bunch of people living in their family? They don't have that private space to go to be able to turn on their camera. And, we talk about bullying and kids making fun of other kids about the clothes that they're wearing. But now we're showing all their classmates where they live and how they live.
Yeah, it's really invasive. It's a really invasive thing. And again, the planning or having cameras on really caters to people that the presumption that all students have their own space or have their own room. And I really hope that schools are really treating this with the sensitivity that it deserves, because it's just, not only are students dealing with the stress of online, they're dealing with stress from the pandemic. There is a lot of trauma. Not everybody has a, wonderful experience around this. There is food insecurity, there is domestic violence, there's domestic abuse there's a lot of super heavy things that are happening in people's homes. So the presumption that, like, oh, you turn on your camera and there's this beautiful room waiting for you, is when that we need to, I would say that the norm is probably that people do live in generational homes and do not enjoy maybe the level of privacy that others do. Privacy is also its own luxury, right? Because you have space to be private. And I really do hope that that schools are sensitive about that, and that students can self-advocate for themselves if need be, to just, if they don't want to have the camera on, or they are worried that it will be a source of shame or humiliation for them, they absolutely should not be strong-armed into that. But that is going to take some really heavy self-advocacy skills, which students need to flex and learn. And this, it's pandemic wise, like there's diminished access with people as it is. And in a school setting, if you're going to a new school or with new peers, or you've moved from elementary to middle or middle to high school, you don't necessarily know all your peers or know all your teachers. And everybody is guests in each other's home in a really awkward way. And I just hope that there really is just sort of grace for life. Grace, what I mean, like we are all giving each other grace that life happens. You may see a cat walk across my stream. You may see, your grandmother pass by in a nightgown or something. And all of those things are just part of life, right? And I hope that we can give each other grace that life happens in people's homes, and to be sensitive and respectful that other people's homes don't look like yours. And I do hope that this is a potential lesson for our students to not judge other people for their living conditions, and extend grace and learn about other people in a way that, maybe wouldn't have been so front and center if we didn't have to have school at home.
Right. I mean, and the reason why we're bringing this up is that know better to do better. So, I mean, and that's another one of the unseen consequences of remote learning, is we need to make sure that that is at the top of the list of how that could affect that child's social, I don't want to say social status, but social.
There's another, yeah. There's another layer too, the presumption that all students are free to be students. There are many students in a position caring for siblings because their parents cannot be home.
True.
So that is another layer of, like, we're assuming that all students, that all they have to do that day is just log in and learn. And that is not the situation for many of our students. They are caring for siblings, they are working, they are essential workers, they're over 16. So that is another layer I just wanted to mention too.
So it's that access, right? Or opportunity is actually the word I was looking for. So the opportunity, and then analogy. I love to speak in analogies, but the analogy I use for opportunity is, I'm going to lay all the pieces to a car out in front of you, and you have the opportunity to drive anywhere you want to go, but you have to put it together first. And I'm not giving you any instruction to put it together. It's there, it's in front of you. You can put it all together and go, but you don't have the knowledge to do it. So is it really opportunity? So, I mean, it goes together with what you're talking about. You don't know if that child is watching, his five or her five, younger siblings, or what the scenario is. So it's not the same access. It's not the same. They're not able to have the same opportunity for education as somebody else. So we really need to make sure that we keep that in mind. Asynchronous learning. You and I had a discussion about asynchronous learning, and the fact that if your child misses a lesson, then if there's not a recorded lesson or lecture or whatever the situation is, well, then that child is missed out on the lesson or the concept or whatever it is. There's not any way. I mean, it's left up to the child and the parent to go back and search YouTube or whatever, if you have that available, to try to figure out how to do the lesson. So, I mean, and you brought up, I'll let you bring up your point about asynchronous learning.
Asynchronous learning, man. I feel really disconnected from perhaps what other parents are experiencing. So asynchronous learning presumes that all students are on grade level. And all lessons for asynchronous learning are based on grade level TEKS or access. So my student is not on grade level. I want to value his privacy and don't want to take away from his ability, but he is many grade levels away from being on grade level. So so what worries me as a parent is that when I see asynchronous learning, I automatically sigh and dread it because our funding is based on, there's going to be a lot of pressure on parents to either A, have your child on camera so they can prove they were there for the day, or B, complete asynchronous work. Well, asynchronous work is completely, it doesn't mean anything for my student, because unless it's modified to be the content to be on his current functioning level, he will not be able to access asynchronous learning, because the presumption is that it is for grade level learners. And we know from our NAP scores and PEIMS data that, that is not, that's a dangerous presumption to just assume all sixth graders are sixth grade level. So how do you then access synchronous learning that is more individualized for that student? And then the question comes, will there be a consequence or punitive action if you do not turn in asynchronous learning lessons that you cannot engage with because your disability impacts you, or technology, or whatever reason? It doesn't have to be disability specific. Like, what is the consequence there? And frankly, as a parent, I am worried about that, because just based on the experience from spring, I think that the logical conclusion is that if those assignments aren't completed, the consequence is nothing. The consequence is that he not do them, therefore doesn't engage with those lessons. And I don't mean to sound uncool, but then he continues to get what I refer to as pity grades.
Well, and with
it's just
with a lot of these districts now starting to use year-round school, well, I mean, it seems like it's going to be exactly what I thought in the very beginning, which was these children that need the extra help, the time that they're going to get that extra help, is during the intersession, or the time when everybody else is off of school and they have to go to school because they're so far behind. So you'll be getting breaks or sporadic, help throughout, this entire process.
It's a real concern for me, and I think for others, that and again, it goes back to, is the onus on me as a parent to request modified lessons? Will someone be providing those? Or if I stay quiet, will those lessons is the presumption just to have low expectations of the student doesn't turn anything in? That in itself is frankly saddening to me. The expectation level just completely drops off because it can't be delivered. The student can't work in a determined way. And it goes, once again, it goes back to that graphic of the ramp. If all of our asynchronous learning and all of our lessons are designed around X student, and let's be honest, they're designed around high achieving students or average achieving students. That's who they're designed for. They're not designed for students that are extremely high achieving, or I don't even like the word achieving. I don't know the right way, but students that are perhaps not as adept at or as quick at academic learning, because I believe all students are capable of high academic achievement. It's just a matter of time and engagement. But they're not designed for those students that need more time or more support or more specialized curriculum. And honestly, as a very adept advocate, I don't know how to access that. I don't know if schools have capacity to give that. So really my plan with asynchronous learning is to do what we can and do what we can. And that's it. Like, I'm sorry, but I am not going to be the curriculum modifier for my student, because I don't have the technical skills to do that.
Well, you're not the teacher either. Yeah, I'm the facilitator to try to make sure that they can do the lesson. However, I'm not the teacher. I don't know. We're running up on time, so I really want to.
I wanted to add one more thing, if I could, please, about
Yeah.
this. I've seen over and over in my school these assumptions about chronological age abilities. I've seen really high level discussions. It's like, oh, well, all middle schoolers and all high schoolers can do X. Just those assumptions of ability by chronological age are really exclusive to a lot of students. And it troubles me that we are just presuming and that all schools at a secondary level, or all students at by a certain chronological age, can do X. It's a very troublesome and harmful assumption, frankly.
I would agree, and I mean, I would say that the colleges agree too, because I mean, they've come out and said y'all are producing children that cannot come into college and be ready to do college level work. It happens all the time. Real quick, I wanted to touch base again, or touch on more support for the students who need it. Are just like I said earlier, the districts know who these kids are. They have lists of these kids, who they are, that are in special education 504. Make sure that you're reaching out to them. Make sure that the Chromebook or laptop profile that the student uses is already loaded with all of the software that a child may need. You're not requiring that child or that parent to have to go search for these apps to access the material the same way everybody else does. That's called FAPE. We need to make sure that they're able to access the material the same way everybody else does. And all of these things it's discussion points. We have to know better to do better. So if we don't bring it up, and we don't start that discussion, there's a lot of people that didn't think about it. I mean, including myself. I was having a discussion with a parent advocate who was in a very similar situation, new platform being rolled out, and her children were struggling so much. And I was so focused on just trying to get the lessons done, get them logged in, get the lessons done, get them turned in, that I wasn't thinking of anything else. So, having other advocates that are out there that bring things to the forefront to get you to see it, that's why we're here. We're here to have these conversations, to be that partner in education. So, thank you, Lisa, for all that you do, and being out there and advocating for our kids. We have to do it. We have to be there. We're doing it for all kids. We're not just doing it for our kids.
Thank you, Stephen. Honestly, I just don't know another way. I think it's at this point incorporated into my being to look for solutions, be part of solutions, and to just engage in advocacy in any way I know how, whether that is, serving on committees or advisory bodies or helping parents one-on-one. I get a lot of phone calls one-on-one, or, sometimes it's being that one lone person in advisory or other positions that is looking through things through a scope of disability. I think most people in my district probably are like, oh, that sped lady, but it is a specific perspective that I have and that I hope is valuable. And all I can do is keep showing up. And to your point, like none of us know everything. And I am on constantly a journey of learning more and incorporating more. So nobody knows what they don't know. So just like you, I am still constantly learning more and more and more about advocacy and about being in service to others, and really just more about disability advocacy in general. I don't presume to know everything, but I do want to try to make an impact as much as I can. Like I hope that my time and efforts will at least minimally make an impact on some lives.
Absolutely. Thank you again for coming on and being a guest. Always enjoy our conversations. You bring so much to the table. We're up on our time, and I want to make sure that, as always, we recommend that if you think that your child is struggling in school, they may have a learning disability, don't wait to get them tested. It is a fairly easy process. You can go to our website, www.empowerdyslexia.info. We have templates on there. You can fill out the information, turn it into your school counselor. This gets the process started. You'll be so relieved to understand exactly what's going on with your child, and we can start the process of building the support system that your child's going to need to make sure that they can be successful in school. I want to say thank you for all of our viewers and listeners for the constant support for Empower Dyslexia. This show is your show. This is about all of us making sure that we are doing the right thing for all kids and getting them the best education as possible. So, again, thank you for tuning in, and we will see you next time. And here's a word from our sponsors.
Learning Ally is a proud sponsor of the Empowered Dyslexia podcast. At Learning Ally, we are always looking for new ways to engage readers struggling with a reading deficit like dyslexia and help them work to their potential. Visit www.learningally.org to learn about the Learning Ally audiobook solution, including which of your students are eligible for access. If you live in Texas, we have great news. The Texas Education Agency provides access to the Learning Ally audiobook solution for all K-12 public and charter school students with reading deficits. Get started today by visiting www.learningally.org/Texas.